Coming up on today's edition of the Art Marketing Podcast, we're talking about how to price your art for Q4, the fourth quarter, the holiday buying season, and specifically, there is nothing new under the sun. Pricing your art has everything to do with one metric, and how to think about your lineup ahead of Q4 with some new tactical and tradecraft. There is literally nothing new under the sun. Boy, is that one true. Where did that even come from originally? Was it in the Bible? Oh no, I got to go look that up. Anyway, ahead of this episode, I reread my pricing opus from like 4 years ago preparing for this. And I got to be honest with you, not a lot has changed since that episode. Not a lot has changed. What has changed is me. The longer I do this, the more time I spend in this industry, the more reps and sets with customers and artists and photographers and seeing marketing campaigns and hearing about sales and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the more I see that the rules rarely change. The rules are the rules. The paradigms are the paradigms. Rote, repetition is the way. I've realized how important it is to cover certain things again and again and again, as they're easy to forget. They're easy to ignore. You see a shiny object. You think the rules don't apply. The rules do. And I talk about the history a lot, and it's like all the years doing this, all the story, all the conversations, all the data, digging into what's selling, why it's selling, what traffic sources, what's the average order value on the sale, did anything get included with the sale, was there a negotiation, all these things. It keeps surfacing the metrics that truly matter. And it makes me like appreciate certain rules even more. And, you know, in a previous episode, 2 episodes back, 3 episodes back, I really like hammered home this point of the fact that creatives never quit, right? And apologies for anyone to listen to that episode, by the way. The audio quality was crap. I chose the wrong audio source. That is on me. It won't happen again. But creatives never quit. And what I routinely say is that, like, running all these webinars all these years, talking to so many artists and photographers, seeing the people in their 80s, their 90s, and sometimes 100 years old saying, Patrick, how do I sell my art? How do I get it out there? I can't turn on a computer. I can't turn on a phone. You're never going to stop creating. The desire for you to sell your creations will never leave you. And all of that rolls up to a time horizon that is just so much longer than anyone ever takes into account. Like it's almost like hard as a human being to even wrap your head around a time horizon that is going to be the remainder of your art creating and attempting to sell career, right? There's decades and decades and decades and decades and decades left. For some people, and I say this all the time in webinars, like if AI solves all of our health issues, there's going to be people that are living to 150. So the point is in all of that, you have way more time in this business than you think you do. Almost no human beings are capable of making decisions and planning with that long time horizon. I feel like we're wired as creatures just to think about the next hour, the next minute, the next hour, the next day, the next month, the next 6 months, the next couple of years. It's really hard to be someone that plans and executes strategies to the benefit of their business and their bottom line on these longer time horizons. But what's been so cool over the years is, it's inside baseball, but we have these Slack channels. Slack is like our communication platform for the business at Art Storefronts, and we have these Slack channels, and we've had them forever. Probably been on Slack like, I don't even know, 10 of the 12 years, as soon as it started. Anyway, inside the Slack channels, every single solitary sale that goes down on the Art Storefronts platform goes into the Slack channel, and there's a channel under a certain revenue threshold, and there's a channel over a certain revenue threshold. And it is so fascinating to see this thing, right? Now, I don't talk about it a ton, and we don't publicize it, but it's impossible not to look at it, because you can just kind of go into it, and literally every single solitary sale that's on the platform, and over the years it's gotten harder and harder to look at because there's a lot of it in there, so you kind of just pop in and you look at a few and you try to understand. But you know, the team will inevitably share like the really exciting ones and the big ones, whoever's in there, because you know we love celebrating the big wins. And what's been wild is that, this being our 12th year at it, like there's a pretty good clip of people that have been with us for 10 years, right? And so over that 10-year period of time, in some cases 10 or 8 or 9 or 7 or whatever, I've got to watch these businesses evolve and mature and grow and figure things out, and sometimes change niches and pivot and try different strategies and all these types of things, which has just been tremendous, right? And I always rant about the webinars, because what's the best way to sell art? It's in person, face to face. What's the next best way? Video chats. Honestly, like, it's incredible. You get to know people that you just, if you were doing business in the 80s or 90s, like, the only way you would know your customer is if you actually visited them or you talked to them on a telephone. And even then, it's not as good as video. Like, nothing's as good as face to face. Anyway, where am I going on that? Over those years, watching those businesses evolve has been tremendous, right? And, one of the incredible things that happens inside the Slack channel is, like, when huge sales get popped in there, and I'm not saying that happens every minute of every day, okay? But when the big sales are in there, the 5,000, the 10,000, the 50,000, the 80, the 90, the 100, those types of ones, if I know the customer, I'm usually calling them and tracking it down, because I'm a marketing guy deep at heart, and I'm trying to devise strategies for you guys on how these things get done. And, you immediately ask them, you immediately congratulate them first. First of all, congratulations, well done. That is a massive sale. Tell me about it. What happened? Who is the buyer? How did it happen? Did they find you via your marketing? If so, did you ask them how they, I go into the full Inspector Clouseau routine that anyone who's in marketing does, because ultimately we're always looking for the story. We're always looking for source attribution. How in the world did you sell that, right? And what I routinely get when I do these investigations and I call the customer, I send them an email, whatever I've got to do to get in touch with them, or someone on my team does it if I don't have the relationship. How did it happen, right? How did you get that big sale? What were the circumstances that led up to it? And asking all those questions. And I am routinely blown away by a recurring pattern, okay? And the recurring pattern shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but I don't think enough people talk about it, and so I think it needs to be raised. The recurring pattern is just this. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years ago, they bought some small thing from me. I met them at an art show, and they bought a small paper print, or they bought a road pillow or a tote or one of my hand-painted wooden spoons. I love talking about those things. Whatever it is, it was some sort of a small sale, right? And it could have been art, could have been anything. And then what happened? Nothing. Then they go dark. You don't hear from this person again. But guess what? You're marketing consistently. You're still sending emails. You're still posting on the socials. You're still running marketing sales campaigns. They know you're alive. They know you exist. But guess what? Just like life happens for everyone, life happens for them. And so they're busy. They're in a stage of life where they're not really thinking about buying art. And then all of a sudden, I see this huge sale, and I'm like, where did that customer come from? And it's like, they bought something from me all those years ago. And I see that again and again and again. And it absolutely underscores, okay, why I always say on this podcast, why I stress that there is one metric that matters most, and why pricing, everything that I advocate on pricing, especially as we're looking at Q4, works backwards from it, okay? It works backwards from it. And for those of you that have not heard my pricing argument, many of you have probably heard it. In short, you need to have a range of pricing. You need to have non-wall art in your lineup. You need a range of pricing. I do it succinctly: 0 to 100, non-wall art, small prints, 100 to 1,000, some combination of prints and maybe originals depending on your situation, way over 1,000, right? Way over 1,000. And I advocate for that all the time. And, I continue to run my webinars 3 days a week. And by the way, shout out to the webinars. If you ever want to come to one, they're super fun. They've been rad, especially for Q4. Running them Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There will be a link in the show notes. Okay, enough with the shameless plug, back to it. But during the webinars, and especially like recently, I often lay out the pricing argument that you've heard me say on this podcast, heard me say it all over, right? And, most people nod their head and they're like, yeah, You're totally right. I need to put that in. But there's decent subsect, let's just call it a fringe. That's not even a fringe. There's a good percentage that are like, I find this pricing argument to be off-putting. I am worried, okay, about what that type of a selling operation, that type of a business would say about me that would make people think about what type of an artist I am. And to the best of my ability and senses, I think it honestly comes from an ideal that people get in their heads about what type of artist they want to be, what type of artist they want to be seen as, to be perceived as, right? Are they a highfalutin, fine artist with mystique and intrigue, or are they some sort of bargain basement e-commerce merchant selling schlotsky, tchotchke, whatever, right? And I think that's where it comes, right? But I think that all of that actually comes, none of it has anything to do with the underlying maths, the nuts and bolts of running an art business, right? And I think like oftentimes people will see an artist they really like that's really successful, and they're doing things a certain way. And they're like, you know what? If that person's doing it that way, that's what I want to look like. That's what I want people to perceive me as a creative. So I'm going to just emulate that, right? And obviously I have strong opinions about this, right? And lots of times, even if you see an artist like that, in some cases it can be they're just a unicorn, right? It's kind of like, yeah, I play basketball and I want to emulate Kobe Bryant's game, so I'm going to do that. But I don't know if that's in the cards for me, right? But independent of that, the larger point I'm trying to make, I totally understand wanting to live your vision through your art business, wanting to be perceived as how you want to be perceived as an artist. I totally get that. My position has never been, nor will it ever be, that there's one certain way that you have to do things, that you have to do things the way that I advocate, right? That you have to have this exact range of pricing. And if you don't do that, your business is not going to work. It's not going to go anywhere. If I've learned anything over these last 12 years, it's that given the width and breadth, age of artists, marketing sophistication, niche selection, media types, subject matter material, all the things, there's such a myriad, it's such a mixed bag of individual creators doing their individual thing that there's no absolutely one surefire way that creates successful artists and creates successful art businesses, okay? So by all means, you can 100% do you. My position is that the numbers and formulas underpinning success are ultimately just maths. It has nothing to do with how you're perceived. It has nothing to do with your individual brand. It has nothing to do with your individual brilliance. There's just maths. The maths apply to art businesses. And I don't think the maths ever lie. And I believe that the maths, at their core, are the difference between a hobby and a business. Are the difference between onesie, twosie, in a business that's actually growing year over year. And I believe, that the key is just not to get hung up or wrapped around the axle on how to achieve the mass. Okay? Just that you do it your way, but you have a fundamental understanding that the mass are extremely important and they're not going away. Okay? They're not going away. By all means, you can do you. You can do your way of doing it. You can maintain your vision, your voice, your brand, your creative aesthetic, and all of those things. But the mass are just not going away, right? This whole thing sort of reminds me of when I was younger, and there was this whole notion of if a band sold out or not, right? And selling out was essentially like the band going and getting a big record deal, and they're doing promos on all the local radio stations across the country, trying to sell their albums and trying to sell their concerts out or whatever. And somehow if you did that as a band, you lost your ultimate street cred, right? And I feel like it's that type of vibe that's pervasive in this industry. And, Okay, by all means, I get it. You got to do you. And I understand the sentiment. And in some ways, I respect it, right? Like, that's amazing if you can do that. But unless you were in the inheritance business, I'm not sure how you feed your family sticking to your guns like that. Like, you have a creative talent. The way that you want that creative talent to pay is to have a business. Underpinning a business, there are maths, there are rules, there are hard and fast rules to a certain extent. It does not mean that it like changes the way, again, your brand, your voice, your aesthetic, your integrity. It doesn't change any of that. You just have to understand the mass, and if you understand the mass, you can put the skin on the skeleton that is your vibe and that lives up to your vision and how you want to be perceived in your integrity, right? And I don't even know why I go down that rabbit hole, aside from the fact that I get pushback on a ton of these things all the time, and I push back to the pushback not because I want you to do things a certain way, but I believe that the mass of the mass. And inevitably, if you're listening to this podcast, it's not because you want to have a hobby. You want to have a business, and you want to have a business that's growing and continuing to grow, right? So it's important to get into the mass. And I brought up the time horizon thing earlier, right? Because I think it so underpins the one metric that matters. And spoiler alert, the one metric that matters, year after year after year, one of the most important metrics in an art business is the number of new customers acquired per year. Number of new customers acquired per year. Can you answer that question? Do you know what that number is? Is that number going up? Right? The beautiful thing about the number, again, is it has absolutely nothing to do with the dollar amount in which you acquire the customer. You acquire the customer at $1, that counts. As long as you get their contact information and you can market to them or they follow you on socials, right? The secondary notion of this whole thing is there's acquiring a customer and not acquiring a customer. Acquiring a customer doesn't care about the dollar amount as long as you can continue to market to them. And so there is this notion of acquiring the customer. A transaction happens. As a result of the transaction, you have the ability to contact the person, market to the person in the future. Okay, great. So the time horizon, okay, the time horizon, the fact of how many decades and decades and decades and decades most of you guys have, that is just where this metric becomes so insanely real. And again, I alluded earlier to the fact that I feel like it's just hard for human beings to be one of these types of planners that can think in decades at a time and where the business is going to be decades down the line. But man, is it so important. And this metric, the number of new customers acquired per year, it gets so insane. The teeth this gets, okay, spread out over the years is just absolutely insane, right? Because if you acquired a customer at the aforementioned $1, $10, $20, whatever it is, right? And then, like I mentioned in the Slack channel, like I mentioned to my customers, and then 8 years later, they came back and spent $35,000. The reason that you acquired that customer at that low dollar amount, okay, is because you had the range of pricing. More important than that, it's because you understood that it's not about how you're perceived as an artist if you want to have a business. It's about how many new customers you acquire, right? The artist that didn't have the range of pricing 8 years ago likely did not acquire a customer for $1, $10, $20, $50, $100, whatever it is. The customer that did have the range of pricing acquired that customer. And then 8 years later, they came back and they spent the $35,000. And these are just the math to me. And I just keep seeing it and seeing it and seeing it and seeing it again. And I mentioned all the years in the business, and it's like it just becomes more and more profound to me, right? You're going to be in this business for life. Whatever God or whoever you believe in has ordained for the rest of your time on this planet. And it just makes this metric, number of new customers acquired per year, 10x as important as it would be in another business. And no one ever talks about that. And I think it's just so important to understand before we get into the nuts and bolts of pricing and what you should have in your lineup and all of that. Just understand number of new customers acquired per year. I think it's just such an important lens. And, I want everyone focused on it on one level or not. If you like my advice, great, take my advice. If you don't like my advice and you want to do things differently, wonderful. Do it that way. If I poked you and prodded you and made you think of some things, just have one takeaway. The number of new customers per year, it just starts compounding, and it compounds year after year after year after year after year. And it's really, really hard to have a good-sized growing business with a lot of sales happening every year if you don't have a large number of new customers coming in that you can market to come back and purchase again, right? You know, I know a great many of you have heard the 3 ways to grow an art business, but this is another one of the truths, one of the maths. First way, acquire new customers, what we're talking about here. Second way, get existing customers to come back and purchase again. And oh, by the way, the maths say it's significantly easier to get someone to come back and purchase again than it is to purchase the first time, right? And then the third way, increase what we call your AOV, your average order value. Easiest way to do that, raise your prices. Second easiest way to do that, bundle additional items that you have in your lineup. So $1,000 order for an original turns into $1,000 order plus a photo book of your photography, right? So those 3 layers are the maths. They're the maths that we want to focus on. They're the maths that we want to continue leaning into, right? And, you know, I said earlier about the time horizon, and I've said earlier in like earlier episodes, because I went back and read it, but I haven't really talked about this like much longer. But okay, time horizon, right? In the earlier example, I used 8 years, but like it could be 8 years, it could be 12 years, it could be 15 years, it could be 20 years, right? You're going to be in this business for life. And I talk about why the range of prices is so important. And I talk about why having non-wall art as a part of your lineup is so important, right? Having something that can represent an impulse buy, having something that I don't have to talk to my significant other about purchasing. And I get into this notion of like, in the past anyway, of like, there's a socioeconomic bell curve, right? And everyone knows what a bell curve looks like. It's shaped like a bell, right? And on the left-hand side, you have the people that are completely broke. And in the middle, you have lower middle class, upper middle class, high net worth individuals, right? It's a bell curve. Well, when you think about a bell curve and you think about your life that you've lived and you think about the people that you know in your life, you sort of notice that people are moving in every direction on that bell curve, right? Sometimes they're at the low end and then they move to the middle end and that's where they stay for the rest of their lives. And sometimes they rocket ship all the way to the high end and then things get a little bumpy and they come back to the low end. There's this guy I work out with, and he was telling the story this morning. He's a pretty successful dude, and he was talking about how he used to go to the chiropractor once a week. And he was, you know, swearing about how great it was for him and the fact that he found it to be really preventative and really helped him out with injuries and such and such and such. And I'm like, yeah, you still going to the chiropractor? He's like, no. I'm like, well, why are you not going to the chiropractor anymore? I thought you loved this. He's like, because it turns out I'm not rich anymore, right? And he sort of said it in jest, but his reality was he was way over on one side of the bell curve and things moved a little bit and now he's not where he once was. In the argument there, okay, is you have this for lifetime horizon. Your customers, your followers, okay, the people that are looking at your art, the people that are contemplating buying your art are no different than any of the rest of us. They're on that bell curve and they're moving, okay? Years are going to come and go. Their position being fixed on that bell curve is not a certainty, okay? Some will stay fixed. Some will move all over it. Some it's going to be like a roller coaster. Some it'll be a slightly upward. So when you have the range, you have something for everyone on the curve, okay? When you have something for everyone on the curve, you acquire a much larger number of new customers per year. It's just maths. That's it, right? And, you know, I inevitably get, and when I say I get this weekly. Patrick, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm really just trying to target high-end hotels, right? I had a gal this week was like, I'm just looking to target boutique hotels. She was in Spain. Great lady. Forget her name. I'm just trying to target boutique hotels that service English guests, and she was in Spain. Or I'm just trying to target luxury interior designers or people that buy art for placement in restaurants or whatever the case may be. Or my favorite, I'm just trying to target high net worth individuals, right? And I chuckle at all of those statements because it's not that there's not ways to do that. There are ways to do that. Like my advice to the gal, she would, like, I went through my whole pricing rant, not so different than what I'm here on this podcast. And she's like, well, how am I going to target these hotels? And I like what you're saying about the pricing range. And I was like, do you know how you're going to target those hotels? You live in Spain. You are going to load your car up with your entire lineup, and you are going to drive the entire country. You are going to hit every one of those hotels. You're going to walk in, see if you can't get a meeting, show off your art, let them know you'll leave it there. They can put it in rooms for free. If it works out and it's great, they can put it in order, right? And she heard that advice, and she sort of accepted it. And she's like, okay, well, all right, I'm going to come back to another session. We'll talk about it, right? And that's great advice. That's exactly how I would do it. But what I've come to realize over all the years is that, do you know how you target those folks the most effectively? By not targeting them at all. You target them the most effectively by realizing that there is a socioeconomic bell curve, by making sure you have things for everybody on it, and then regularly and consistently marketing and being remarkable and being great at your craft and continue getting better at it. Okay? Because when you do that, those people are inevitably going to fall in that socioeconomic bell curve, buy something at whatever the price is, move around, tell friends, and you don't worry about how that magical formula all comes together because no one can worry about it. It's like trying to game an algorithm. Like it's a fool's errand. Just focus on the basics. And the basics say, get as many new customers as you can because it's easier to get existing customers to come back and purchase a second time than it is to get a new customer to buy for the first time. And then let the score take care of itself. Like, that's it. That's like literally it. And it bears repeating. I mentioned road at the top of the episode. Like, we just need to keep saying it and saying it and saying it because people forget it and they come up with all these excuses why it's not important and it doesn't apply to them. It does apply to you. It applies to the nuts and bolts, the maths of this business. That's it. And to sum this up, it's not, my position is not that you have to sell anything you don't want to sell or put your art on something that you think is cheap or chitsy or low rent or whatever, okay? Tchotchke nonsense. You do you. Just understand the metric of new customers acquired per year is real. It's just math. Your business has a number, and if you don't have the range of pricing and you don't have non-wall art in the lineup, it is going to be significantly more difficult for you to cater to that socioeconomic bell curve, to put yourself in a position where you're acquiring as many new customers per year as you possibly can. And so I think you need to be doing that. I think every art business needs to be aware that those maths are the maths. Okay? If you're at least aware, all good. Do you. If you don't want to do it this way and you want to do it a different way, I totally understand that. Respect, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm just trying to stack the deck in your favor to the best of my ability, right? To the best of my ability. Now, for those that have not listened to my magnum opus on pricing, okay, I will link it in the show notes. It's like a full-blown hour episode where I like really, really deep dive into pricing, okay? But the long and the short is the TLDR. For the uninformed, TLDR stands for too long, didn't read it, comes from Reddit. Anyway, yes, I want you to have a range of pricing ahead of Q4. Yes, I want you to have non-wall art in your lineup. And no, I don't care what the non-wall art is, as long as it can be an impulse purchase and as long as it caters to the lower end of the socioeconomic bell curve, because those folks will come back and purchase again 8 years later. Yes, POD, print on demand, is what unlocks this for artists, no matter their financial status. And that's so important to say, right? And you guys have heard me do the episodes earlier. If you've been listening, about Weiland and about Gray Malin and about how many other artists I could cite that have figured this out so long ago. But you don't need to have thousands of images to have a store with thousands of items in it. Print on demand unlocks this for you. No minimums, no inventory. You go from having a store where you really only have 6 items to having 1,200 items, and it doesn't cost you a thing. That is insane. That is insane. And yes, if you follow this advice, you will acquire more new customers this Q4 as a result. And lastly, if you acquire 10x, 20x, 50x, the number of new customers that you would have without the lineup, and you continue to market to them, a good percentage will come back and buy from you again and again. And naturally, my dream for all of you is a large number of them coming in all year long. And there is no better time for that than Q4, which is why we get you going, right? Which is why we get you going. So I want to talk about some generic POD strategies and pricing strategies, print on demand, POD. And, a lot of this dovetails with the 3 ways to grow a business. New customers, get new customers to come back and purchase again, increase your AOV, right? And increasing your AOV in an e-commerce online world, with most of us are focused on, there's a bunch of fancy terms for this, right? Some people call them order bumps. Some people call them one-click upsells, or post-purchase sales, or post-purchase merchandising. There's like 50 terms. I don't care about any of that. Just think about retail, okay? There is trying to get your customer to buy something else before they check out, and there's trying to get your customer to buy something else after they check out. And I always use the hardware store example. I went to the hardware store today. I bought a thing, or I grabbed a thing that I was going to purchase. I got in line. There were people in line. I had to wait. I had to look at the magazines and the candy and the cell phone chargers and the fly swatters and the duct tapes and the screwdrivers and the ice cream and all the nonsense that was on sale. That is pre-purchase offers to try and increase my AOV, right? I came to buy a thing. They're trying to sell me another thing. Then I check out. And in my hardware store, I don't know if your hardware store does this. I've just got an Ace Hardware, which, if you're an international listener or whatever, it's a big local hardware store in the United States. Anyway, after I've completed my transaction, they ask if I want to round my change up, right? So my order costs $5.30. Do I want to donate 70 cents to such and such cause, the Red Cross, some lifeguard foundation, whatever it is? And that is just post-purchase behavior, right? And both of those is a retail store's way of increasing their AOV, their average order value, okay? Well, why I rant on the POD all year is POD makes it extremely easy to engage in both of these activities. Try to get more money out of your customer before they order. Try to get more money out of your customer after they order, okay? It works all year long, and it works particularly well during Q4, okay? Because what is Q4 essentially? Remember the socioeconomic curve? Well, the gift buyers flood every band of that socioeconomic curve in a Q4. They just do, okay? So when you unlock the range, when you unlock non-wall art, you have such a tremendous example to mimic the behavior of the hardware store, the supermarket, the electronics store. Stores have been doing this for as long as retail's around, although they've gotten more and more sophisticated over the years, because it helps them grow much bigger businesses. And you can 100% do this. And what unlocks it is having the thing to sell in the first place, right? So I really want you aware of that ahead of this Q4. And look, if you're with Arts Reference, we obviously make this very easy. If you're not and you're just listening to this, figure out something that you can offer non-wall art related in your inventory. And if you get an order in person, show them something before they purchase. Ask them if they want to add it to their order. And then show them something after they purchase and ask them if they want to add it to their order. It's not any more difficult than that. And the whole reason is AOV, average order value. They bought something for $5,000, $500. You give them an offer for an additional $150, and now it's $5,150 or $5,150, right? Or $650, I should say. So be aware of that. Print on demand unlocks that, right? And we could do a deep dive on it. There's a number of different strategies on how you price what happens before, how you price what happens after. But that's not the subject of today's podcast. I want you guys aware of it because increasing the AOV is tremendous, and there's no better way to do that ahead of Q4. Gift cards, okay? And I'm just talking about some generic POD stuff because I think it's important. When you have the non-wall art related things in your lineup, when you have a range of pricing, a gift card goes from being some sort of nonsensical, why the hell would I buy a gift card from an artist, to, wow, the gift card is actually really cool. Honey, I really dig this artist and his creativity. I think you will too. I didn't know what you would have loved that they've created, so I got you a gift card instead. No one does that for someone that just sells originals at $5,000 a piece, right? Unless you're buying a very expensive gift card, which would be a huge risk. But they would do that all day at lower amounts, and they do it all day at lower amounts. So I want you guys thinking about gift cards, and we might talk about that in a future episode too. Also, why POD? Okay? Also, why POD? Because with the Q4 season, with the crazy buying season comes crazy negotiation, okay? With POD, because you can mark up everything, and I don't mean this on the merch side, I mean this on the art side, but it's just really important to see, because you mark everything up 250%, and that is what we advise, it's very, very easy to negotiate, okay? Those are all critically important to be thinking about ahead of Q4. And as I'm recording this, it's in August, right? Q4 really doesn't kick off till October. So there is plenty of time for everyone to get their act in gear ahead of that holiday buying season. But these are the things that you need to be thinking about, and these are the things that no one ever likes to talk about in August. By all means, I'm not saying any of you have to sell out and sell anything that you don't want to sell. All I'm saying is the mass of the mass, number of new customers acquired per year, is significant, okay? Is significant. I want to get into some Q4 tradecraft, okay? And the type of stuff that we're going to cover and we're going to finish this thing up with is the nuts and boltsy type of stuff that artists or photographers just never do, okay? It's just stuff that they never do. And because it's sort of esoteric, deep in the weeds, strategic, e-commerce merchant stuff. But I think sometimes it's important to cover it, right? It's important to talk about it. And as we get into Q4, as I've alluded to, it's gift buying season. Okay. And why do I think it's important to get into this nutsy boltsy stuff? And I don't do it the rest of the year. Okay. The reason that I do it now is because I know the volume of art and photography that's going to be sold in the next couple of months. Okay. I know if there was ever a chance to bring this type of, in the weeds, techie details to the table, that now is the time to do it. And what underpins all of the reasons why I'm telling you this, what I'm about to tell you here, this stuff, because it's going to help you acquire new customers. And I don't care about anything else. I'm not getting stuck in the weeds about anything other than the mass. Okay. Q4. It's gift buying season. Okay. Psychologically speaking, gift buyers price the occasion, not the art. They price the occasion. And we see this in retail, like pretty much across the board. Okay. And as I talk about it, you're all going to understand what it is. And again, this all rolls back up to the range pricing, not wall art. Gift buyers price the occasion. What that means is there are budget slots in their mind. I got $25 budgeted for this. I've got $50 budgeted for this. I've got $100, $250, $500 budgeted for this, right? And psychologically, it like becomes this notion of mental accounting, right? And there's some studies on it. I'm not going to go into the weeds. There's a big one with this guy Thaler. Anyway, people pre-assign budgets to occasions and shop within the slot, right? That's kind of like you're going to a holiday party and there's a gag gift budget, and the gag gift budget is $50 and less, right? And you have to like shop in that. The holiday party aside, there's something powerful mentally about it, right? About understanding budget slots. Great gifts for under 25, for under 50, 100. We all see this in the marketing and everything else. Now, I'm not saying that we have to behave like Nordstrom's or behave like Best Buy and do this, but I'm saying if you're aware of it and you think about it and you start lining up your lineup in a way that it would work in this capacity, human beings just take action, right? They just take action. There's data from Nordstrom, Etsy, Uncommon Goods, the MoMA Design Store. Holiday gift guides are merchandised by price band. Gifts under 100, gifts under 25, not by category. And, there's so many different retailers with billions in data that have all landed on this same architecture. And so it absolutely applies to art, right? And inevitably, buyers always spend to the top of their slot. They just do, right? Because as humans, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to spend a gift under 50. No one wants to spend 20 or 30 or 25 or 18, right? Like you want to get right under 50 or as close as possible as you can. Okay. So if you understand that, you understand the gift buying mindset, right? This rolls up to emails. This rolls up to social posts. Okay. This rolls up to absolutely everything that you do in terms of marketing. If you put it into your buyer's mind that you've got things in your lineup that tick these gift boxes, you are going to get sales that you wouldn't have otherwise got. That's it. That's it, right? And it's more about like hitting that price that's crazy. And I saw this data from Etsy, and Etsy, it's not a perfect match to what we do as selling art and photography, but it's pretty close, right? It's pretty close. There's a ton of stuff in there. Etsy's data is that 27% of everything sold there is a gift. 27% of everything. And obviously those numbers go up significantly, okay? Significantly in Q4. So I can put some notes in the show notes that speak to all of this. The takeaway is exactly like I said in the previous episode, where think about the destination always. The destination is so important. Why do I love the bathroom art sale? Because your customers don't have to think about where they're buying the art for. They don't have to go through the mental gymnastics to understand, is it going to fit my fireplace? Is it going to be too big next to that chair? Is it going to... No, they don't have to think about that because it's not going there. It's going to the bathroom, right? And so you're just removing some of the mental gymnastics, some of the friction that's inevitably in a sale. And when Christmas comes, yes, the destination is under the tree. Yes, the destination is getting stuffed into the stocking. But yes, the destination is also hitting the budget slots for a gift. The 25, the 50, the 100, the 250, the 500. Okay? So it's not something that people normally contemplate when trying to sell art, because most people get hung up in this idea that somehow because they're selling art, it doesn't mean they have a business. No, you have a business. It rolls up to acquiring new customers. Think about these budget slots. Think about how you can comport things from your lineup into these budget slots. Think how you can combine things that will comport to these budget slots, and then think about how you can incorporate into your marketing your lineup that hits these budget slots. Because what you're doing is you're signaling to your buyer exactly where this thing goes. It's in the bathroom, it's under the tree, it's a stocking stuffer, or it fulfills this gift obligation that you have, right? Which is also a destination in all of this thing. Okay. This one really actually infuriates me, but it's important, okay? Price endings. There's been a ton of study on this. What do I mean by price endings? I mean what the price ends in, okay? And I know this is super meta and this is super in the weeds, but again, it's Q4. We don't care about anything but the number of new customers that we acquire. The long and the short is, okay? The long and the short is originals should end in zeros. Anything on the lower end should end in nines. That's it. Not any more difficult than that. MIT has studied this. There's some like really, really powerful studies, purchase price studies, Thomas and Morowitz. I mean, I'm like looking at my notes. I don't even know what any of these things are, aside from the fact that I've read some of them. Point is, if you're selling an original and it's $3,150, it should be for $3,000. Okay? It should be $3,500. Okay? Not $3,150, not $3,427, nothing like that. On the higher end of the price spectrum, people just like numbers that end in zeros. The maths, for reasons I don't fully understand, just say that you will see a significant bump in take rate, in purchase rate, okay, if it ends in zeros. Now, the other ones, okay, the smaller stuff in your lineup, ending in 99, ending in 47, ending in 57, all of those things can help. And I don't know why the psychology works out the way that it does there, right? But it just does. Like, there's studies where 99 cents beats 88 cents. And why the nines work, I don't know. They feel like, you're getting a discount, you're getting something off. It's just one of those mental things that work. So be aware of that, right? Be aware of that as you're going to price your art in Q4. If there's a bunch of data that is proven from a retail capacity to just work, and it costs us very little, i.e. changing our prices means absolutely nothing, you can go up, you can go down. On the cheaper stuff, work on the nines. On the more expensive stuff, make the numbers even. Okay? Make them even. Make them have zeros in it. Simple, but powerful, and a ton of data to back it up. Stepped edition pricing. And I'm just kind of planting some seeds for some ideas to give you some Q4 ideas, and then later down the line as we get closer, I'll delve into strategies on how to do all these things. But I really, really like stepped edition pricing. Okay? And I really, really like this, especially because a lot of you guys sell limited editions. And I love limited editions because I've long said on this podcast that, again, going back to maths, if you have the discount plus scarcity, it creates action, right? It's a mathematical formula that just has human beings more likely to take action. Nothing changes. Product doesn't change. The guy selling the product doesn't change. Who the guy selling the product is doesn't change. The only thing that changes is guy A is selling a product, guy B is using discount plus scarcity, and guy B sells more because that equation works, right? And the beautiful thing about Q4 is the scarcity is there, right? Because it's a holiday buying season. It only comes around one time. It's already there. The discount, how you approach that, there's a ton of room for creativity in that, which is where the stepped edition pricing comes in, right? And so I like the thought of executing a price ladder, okay? And this is a published price ladder, and I'll give you an example. You are going to come out with a limited edition of 50. Perhaps you pick one of your images that you really, really like, and you're going to put it on metal, and you're going to have it in a small size even, but you're going to hand sign each one of them. It's going to have the certificate of authenticity. But here's the deal. You're going to do a limited edition of 50. The first 10, you're selling at $500. The next tranche, it's $650. In the final 10, it's $1,100. The schedule is public. The transparency is the urgency. And this one in particular is like really, really become prevalent in this notion in the AI world, right? And anyone that's deep in the AI world, I'm way too deep in the AI world. My wife yells at me occasionally, get me out of here, help me. There's so many new pieces of software being created. Like pre-AI, like if there was one piece of software created a month, let's just say, post-AI, there's like 20, right? And there are so many of them that are leveraging this strategy. It's crazy. Certain price for the first 20 copies, the Founders Edition, right? Different price for the next 50, right? And they list, they'll say like, your order number 52, you got it for $99. Everyone else got it for $49. And then the next one up. So it can be incredibly, incredibly powerful to have something like that working on your site, right? This works incredibly well on limited editions, works incredibly well for photography. It's very easy to leverage your AI du jour and ask them to help you design one of these strategies. But I think an incredibly, incredibly important Q4 strategy. Okay. As a final, and am I advocating that I want all of you to do this? No, not necessarily, especially not if you're selling, although maybe. Yes, I think all of you should do it. If a discount plus scarcity equals action, or a human being more likely to take action, if a discount plus scarcity equals action is way easier to do during Q4, a holiday season that everyone knows is going to end, it's a little bit harder to do it. It's the middle of March. I'm having a sale. It ends on Friday. Good for you. No one cares. The fact that it's Q4 and it's the holiday buying season, that is real. Everyone knows that this thing is going to come. It's going to go. It's going to be done. Okay, fine. I want all of you thinking about the January price increase you're going to do. Every one of you is going to raise your prices. You can pick a number, 5%, 10%, 15%. January 1. And you just want to let everyone know that that's coming. And so buy now. And I think back to Weiland, right? Like Weiland said, every single solitary year, I can't remember if his number is 10 or 15%, but every single solitary year, Wyland has raised his prices, aside from one, which was like, I can't remember which huge economic recession it was that he didn't. But he's raised it every single solitary year. And one, he does that because it's a smart way to increase his AOV, his average order value. But really, it's about increasing urgency during an important buying season. It's about signaling the fact that your work is so in demand, whether it is or not, that you can get away with it. Okay? So in January, prices are going to increase. I want almost all of you to do this. I think it will work fantastically well. What is the most important metric? It is the number of new customers that your business acquires. My position this Q4 is that you have the greatest opportunity, if you dial your lineup, if you get POD going, to acquire way more new customers than you would ordinarily, certainly than you did last year or any of the years previous. But you've got to do the work now. It's August as we record this. We're going to blink. October, summer's over, October's here, and we're in it. So think about these things. You guys are going to be in this business forever. If you start acquiring a ton of new customers, it is going to be way easier to get them to come back and purchase again. The bigger I can get you to grow that list of new customers, the more I have confidence in the revenue potential of your business. The mass of the mass, they're not changing. And as always, thanks for listening, and have a great day.